The afternoon sun filtered through the dusty windows of Murphy's diner, casting long shadows across the worn linoleum floor. It was one of those places that time seemed to have forgotten. Red vinyl booths cracked from decades of use, a jukebox in the corner that hadn't played a tune since the 80s, and the persistent aroma of coffee that had been brewing too long. The kind of place where stories lived in every corner, whispered between the clatter of plates and the gentle hum of conversation. Billy Joel pushed through the glass door, its brass handle smooth from countless hands before his. He wasn't supposed to be here. His tour bus had broken down 30 miles outside of Millfield, Ohio, a town so small it barely registered on most maps. While his crew worked with local mechanics, Billy had wandered into the heart of this forgotten place, drawn by something he couldn't quite name. Maybe it was the simplicity he craved after months of sold-out arenas and flashing lights. Maybe it was the need to remember who he was before the world knew his name. He chose a booth near the window, sliding across vinyl that exhaled a soft sigh under his weight. The diner was nearly empty. Just an elderly farmer reading yesterday's newspaper, a young mother trying to keep her toddler entertained with crayons, and behind the counter, a woman who moved with the quiet efficiency of someone who had been doing this job for longer than she cared to remember. Her name tag read Eleanor, though she looked nothing like the Eleanor from his famous song. This Eleanor was probably in her late 40s, with graying brown hair pulled back in a practical ponytail and eyes that held stories she'd never told. She wore the standard uniform, a powder blue dress with white trim and sensible shoes that had walked thousands of miles across this very floor. But there was something about the way she carried herself, a dignity that transcended her surroundings, that caught Billy's attention. "What can I get you, honey?" Eleanor asked, appearing at his table with a coffee pot and a weary smile. Her voice carried the slight twang of Ohio, mixed with something else, a cultured undertone that seemed out of place in this small-town diner. "Just coffee for now, thanks," Billy replied, returning her smile. He watched as she filled his cup with steady hands, noticed the calluses on her fingers, the wedding ring that had worn thin from years of wear. "You passing through?" she asked, the question every small-town waitress probably asked every stranger. "You could say that. Bus broke down." Eleanor nodded knowingly. "Murphy's Garage will fix you right up. Tom Murphy's been keeping vehicles running in this town for 40 years, his daddy before him too." As she turned to leave, Billy heard her humming softly under her breath. The melody stopped him cold. It was beautiful, haunting and complex, with a progression that spoke of real musical knowledge. He found himself leaning forward, trying to catch more of it, but Eleanor had already moved away, tending to the farmer who needed his coffee warmed up. The afternoon stretched on, and Billy found himself in no hurry to leave. He ordered pie, apple, homemade, with a crust that reminded him of his mother's kitchen, and watched the small drama of the diner unfold around him. Eleanor moved through it all with grace, serving coffee, clearing tables, always with that same patient smile, even when customers were less than kind, and they were often less than kind. Billy watched in growing discomfort as a group of younger men in work clothes made increasingly rude comments about Eleanor's appearance, her speed, her very presence. She endured it all with dignity, but Billy could see the hurt in her eyes, the way her shoulders tensed with each cruel remark. When one of them deliberately spilled sugar across the table and demanded she clean it up like a good little waitress, something inside Billy snapped. "Excuse me," he said, standing up and walking over to their table. The men looked up at him with the casual arrogance of people who had never been challenged in their small corner of the world. "Yeah?" the apparent leader said, a man with thinning hair and arms covered in amateur tattoos. "I think you owe the lady an apology." The man laughed, a harsh sound that echoed off the diner's walls. "And who exactly are you to tell us what to do?" Billy could have told them, could have mentioned the gold records, the Grammy Awards, the millions of albums sold worldwide. Instead, he simply said, "Someone who knows how to treat people with respect." The tension in the room was palpable. The farmer had looked up from his newspaper, The young mother had stopped coloring with her child, and Eleanor stood frozen by the coffee machine, clearly torn between gratitude and fear of making things worse. "Look, old man," the leader said, standing up to face Billy, "maybe you should mind your own business, and maybe you should apologize to Eleanor and leave." Billy interrupted, his voice calm but carrying an unmistakable authority. The confrontation might have escalated, but at that moment, the diner's owner, a heavy-set man with kind eyes and grease-stained apron, emerged from the kitchen. "Is there a problem here?" he asked, and something in his tone suggested that these men had caused problems before. The leader looked around the diner, suddenly aware that all eyes were on them, and perhaps recognizing that they had crossed a line. After a moment of tense silence, he threw some bills on the table and gestured to his friends. "Come on, let's get out of this dump," he muttered, and they filed out, leaving behind the lingering scent of their cheap cologne and cheaper attitudes. Eleanor approached Billy's table, her hands trembling slightly as she refilled his coffee cup. "You didn't have to do that," she said quietly. "Yes, I did," Billy replied. "Nobody should have to put up with that." Eleanor studied his face for a moment, and Billy saw something flicker in her eyes, recognition perhaps, though she didn't say anything. Instead, she simply nodded and returned to her work. As the evening wore on and the diner emptied out, Billy found himself reluctant to leave. There was something about this place, about Eleanor, that kept him rooted to his vinyl seat. Maybe it was the way she hummed while she worked, melodies that seemed to come from somewhere deep inside her. Maybe it was the gentle way she had handled that difficult situation, maintaining her dignity even when others had tried to strip it away. "We'll be closing soon," Eleanor said, approaching his table as she wiped her hands on her apron. "Of course," Billy said, reaching for his wallet, but instead of just leaving money for his coffee and pie, he found himself asking, "That song you were humming earlier, where did you learn it?" Eleanor's hands stilled on her apron, and for a moment, Billy thought she might not answer. When she finally spoke, her voice was barely above a whisper. "I wrote it." "You wrote it?" Billy couldn't hide his surprise. "It was beautiful. Really beautiful." Eleanor's cheeks flushed slightly. "It's just something I did, a long time ago." "Did you study music?" Eleanor glanced around the empty diner as if checking to make sure they were truly alone. Then she sat down across from Billy, her movements tentative, as if she wasn't quite sure she should be having this conversation. "Juilliard," she said simply, "class of '94. Billy felt his coffee cup freeze halfway to his lips. "Juilliard." Eleanor nodded, looking down at her hands. "Piano and composition. I had dreams of, well, dreams don't pay the bills, do they?" "What happened?" Eleanor was quiet for so long that Billy thought she might not answer. When she finally spoke, her voice carried the weight of years of disappointment and sacrifice. "Life happened. My husband got sick. Cancer. The medical bills, the treatments. We lost everything. Our house, our savings, everything. After he died, I came here to stay with my sister, and I just never left. That was 15 years ago." Billy felt something tighten in his chest. Here was a woman who had trained at one of the most prestigious music schools in the world, who could compose melodies that stopped him in his tracks. And she was serving coffee in a small-town diner because life had dealt her an impossible hand. "Do you still play?" he asked. Eleanor's smile was sad. "The church has an old, upright piano. Sometimes, after everyone's gone, I'll play a little. But I haven't composed anything new in, it must be 10 years now." "Why not?" Eleanor shrugged, a gesture that tried to appear casual but carried the weight of 1,000 small defeats. "What's the point? Who's going to hear it? Who would care about the songs of a middle-aged waitress in Millfield, Ohio?" Billy wanted to tell her that he cared, that anyone who truly loved music would care. But he sensed that Eleanor had heard empty encouragement before. Instead, he made a decision that would surprise them both. "Would you play something for me?" Eleanor looked startled. "Here, now. Is there a piano nearby?" Eleanor hesitated, then nodded toward a door at the back of the diner. "There's an old upright in the storage room. The owner's daughter used to take lessons, but that was years ago. I keep it tuned. Old habit, I guess. Would you mind?" Eleanor studied his face for a long moment, and Billy could see her wrestling with something. Embarrassment, maybe, or fear of exposing a part of herself that she had kept hidden for so long. Finally, she stood up. "I suppose it wouldn't hurt." She led him through the narrow hallway behind the counter, past cases of canned goods and stacks of napkins, to a small room that clearly served as storage. But there, against the far wall, sat an old upright piano, its wood dark with age but clearly well maintained. Eleanor sat on the bench and lifted the lid, revealing keys that were yellowed with age but clean and well cared for. She placed her hands on the keys, and Billy could see them trembling slightly. "I'm out of practice," she warned. "I don't mind." Eleanor closed her eyes for a moment as if gathering courage, then began to play. The melody that filled the small room was nothing like Billy had expected. It wasn't the simple tune she had been humming earlier, but something far more complex and beautiful. Her fingers moved across the keys with the muscle memory of someone who had once lived and breathed music, creating harmonies that seemed to reach into Billy's chest and squeeze. But it was when she began to sing that Billy felt his world shift. Her voice was untrained by professional standards. There was no studio polish, no perfect pitch correction, but it carried an authenticity and emotion that Billy had rarely heard, even from the most accomplished performers. She sang about small-town dreams and big-city heartaches, about love lost and hope deferred, about the quiet dignity of ordinary people living extraordinary interior lives. The song ended, and for a moment, the storage room was perfectly silent. Eleanor kept her hands on the keys, not looking at Billy, as if she was afraid of what she might see in his expression. "Eleanor," Billy said finally, his voice hoarse with emotion. That was incredible." Eleanor's hands fell into her lap. "It's nothing special." "No," Billy said firmly, "it's everything special. That song, where did it come from?" Eleanor finally looked at him, and Billy saw tears glistening in her eyes. "It's about this place, these people, the dreams we all carry, and the compromises we make. I wrote it about Mrs. Henderson, who comes in every Tuesday and orders the same thing and tells me about her son who never calls. About Danny Murphy, who works at his father's garage but wanted to be an artist. About all of us who ended up somewhere we never expected to be." Billy felt something crystallize in his mind, an idea so clear and urgent that he couldn't ignore it. "Eleanor, I need to tell you something." She waited, her expression curious but guarded. "My name is Billy Joel." For a moment, Eleanor didn't react. Then, slowly, recognition dawned in her eyes. "The Billy Joel." Billy nodded. "And what I just heard, that song, your voice, is not nothing special. It's extraordinary, and I think the world needs to hear it." Eleanor shook her head, standing up from the piano bench. "Oh, no, I can't. I'm just a waitress." "You're not just anything," Billy said, standing as well. "You're a musician, a real musician, and that song you just played, it's better than half the stuff on the radio." Eleanor began pacing the small room, her hands fluttering nervously. "This is insane. You can't just walk into someone's life and turn it upside down." "I'm not trying to turn your life upside down," Billy said gently. "I'm trying to give you back the life you were meant to live." Eleanor stopped pacing and looked at him, her eyes wide with fear and something that might have been hope. "What are you suggesting?" Billy took a deep breath. "I'm suggesting that you let me help you record that song. Really record it in a professional studio with professional musicians. I'm suggesting that the world deserves to hear what I just heard." "I can't afford—" "You don't need to afford anything. This would be my gift to you, to music, to everyone who's ever had to put their dreams on hold." Eleanor sank back onto the piano bench, overwhelmed. "Why? Why would you do this for someone you just met?" Billy sat down beside her on the bench, the old wood creaking under their combined weight. "Do you know why I got into music?" Eleanor shook her head. Because I heard songs that changed my life. Songs that made me feel less alone, less crazy, less like the only person in the world who felt the things I felt. Your song just did that for me. In 5 minutes, you reminded me why I fell in love with music in the first place. Eleanor was quiet for a long moment, staring at her hands. I haven't performed for anyone in 15 years. Then it's time. I don't know if I remember how. You just showed me that you do. Eleanor looked up at him, and Billy could see the war raging behind her eyes, between fear and hope, between the safety of her small life and the terrifying possibility of something more. If I said yes, she said slowly, and I'm not saying I am, but if I said yes, what would happen? Billy smiled. We'd start by recording that song you just played. Then we'd see where it takes us. And if nobody likes it, then at least you'll have tried. At least you'll have a recording of something beautiful that you created. Eleanor stood up and walked to the small window that looked out over the alley behind the diner. The sun was setting now, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink that seemed almost too beautiful for this forgotten corner of Ohio. I used to dream about this, she said quietly. When I was at Juilliard, when I was young and stupid enough to think that talent was enough. I used to imagine someone discovering my music, someone who could help me share it with the world. Dreams don't have expiration dates, Billy said. Eleanor turned back to him, and for the first time since he'd met her, Billy saw the young woman she had once been, the one who had walked into Juilliard with stars in her eyes and music in her heart. When would we do this? Whenever you're ready. I have a studio in New York, or we could find something closer if that's easier. Whatever works for you. Eleanor laughed, a sound that was half joy and half terror. This is crazy. The best things usually are. Eleanor sat back down at the piano and played a few bars of her song again, as if she needed to reassure herself that it was real, that it was worth the risk Billy was asking her to take. There's something else, she said suddenly. What? I have other songs. Lots of them. I've been writing them for 15 years, even though I never thought anyone would hear them. Billy felt his heart speed up. How many? Maybe 40 or 50. I write them down in notebooks and hide them in my closet like some kind of musical diary. Billy could barely contain his excitement. Eleanor, do you understand what this could mean? An entire album of songs written by someone with your training, your life experience, your perspective? Eleanor was shaking her head again, but Billy could see that she was starting to believe, starting to hope. I need time to think about this, she said finally. Of course, take all the time you need. Billy reached into his wallet and pulled out a business card, writing his personal phone number on the back. But when you're ready, call me. Day or night. Doesn't matter. Eleanor took the card, holding it like it might disappear if she gripped it too tightly. They made their way back through the diner, which now felt different somehow, charged with possibility. At the front door, Eleanor turned to him. Why me? She asked. You must meet talented people all the time. Billy considered the question, thinking about all the musicians he'd encountered over the years, some more technically skilled than Eleanor, some with better voices, some with more experience. But none of them had moved him the way her simple song had. Because you write the truth, he said finally, and the truth is rare in music these days. Eleanor nodded, though Billy wasn't sure she understood what he meant. Not yet. Thank you, she said, for standing up for me earlier, for listening to my music, for seeing something in me that I'd forgotten was there. Thank you for reminding me why I became a musician in the first place. Billy walked back to where his tour bus was waiting, his mind racing with possibilities. His crew was ready to go, the mechanical problems solved, but Billy found himself reluctant to leave this small town behind. Over the next 3 days, Billy called Eleanor twice. Both times, she was polite but non-committal, clearly still wrestling with his offer. Billy didn't push. He understood that for someone who had given up on their dreams, the prospect of pursuing them again could be terrifying. On the 4th day, his phone rang at 6 in the morning. Billy? Eleanor's voice was shaky but determined. "It's Eleanor, from the diner." "Eleanor, hi, how are you?" "I'm scared," she admitted. "But I keep thinking about what you said, about dreams not having expiration dates. And I realize that I'm more scared of living the rest of my life, wondering what if, than I am of trying and failing." Billy smiled, feeling a surge of excitement and pride. "Does that mean you'll do it?" "I want to try, but I have conditions." "Name them." "I can't leave town for more than a few days at a time. I have responsibilities here, people who depend on me." "We'll work around that. We can bring the studio to you if we need to. And if I record something and it's terrible, you have to promise to tell me the truth." "I promise, but Eleanor..." "Yes, it won't be terrible." Eleanor laughed, and Billy could hear the tears in her voice. "I hope you're right." 2 weeks later, Billy returned to Millfield with a mobile recording setup and a small crew of his most trusted musicians and engineers. They set up in the town's community center, a modest building that served as the heart of local gatherings. Church suppers, high school graduations, town hall meetings. Eleanor had been nervous about performing in front of strangers, so Billy kept the crew small and made sure everyone understood that they were part of something special. When Eleanor walked into the community center that first morning, wearing a simple blue dress and carrying a notebook filled with 15 years' worth of songs, Billy could see her hands shaking. "Just pretend it's the storage room at the diner," he told her gently. "Just you and the piano and the music." Eleanor nodded and sat down at the upright piano they had brought in, newer than the one at the diner, but tuned to perfection. She opened her notebook, took a deep breath, and began to play. The first song she recorded was the one Billy had heard that night at the diner, the one about small-town dreams and the dignity of ordinary people. But as the day progressed, Eleanor began to relax, and the songs that emerged were even more powerful. There was Tuesday Regular, about Mrs. Henderson and her weekly visits to the diner, a poignant meditation on loneliness and the small rituals that keep us connected to the world. There was Murphy's Garage, a surprisingly upbeat number about finding purpose in unexpected places. There was Late Night Lullaby, a heartbreaking ballad about her husband's final days that left everyone in the studio in tears. But it was the song she played on the third day that truly took Billy's breath away. "This one's called The Waitress's Song," Eleanor said, her fingers finding the opening chords. "It's about all of us who ended up in service jobs, who spend our days taking care of other people, while our own dreams sit on a shelf gathering dust." The song began quietly, almost conversationally, Eleanor's voice carrying the weight of experience. "I pour your coffee with a smile, take your order, walk these aisles. Behind this uniform I wear lives a woman you don't see there. I had dreams of concert halls, now I'm cleaning bathroom stalls, but there's dignity in honest work, even when your own dreams hurt. Because I'm more than just your waitress, more than just a face you'll forget. I'm a symphony unfinished. I'm a song you haven't heard yet." As Eleanor sang, Billy found himself thinking about all the Eleanors in the world, talented, educated, creative people whose circumstances had forced them into jobs that didn't reflect their true capabilities. He thought about the casual cruelty of customers who saw service workers as less than human, and the quiet strength it took to maintain dignity in the face of such treatment. The song built to a powerful chorus that was both defiant and hopeful. So next time you see a waitress or a cleaner or a clerk, remember there's a person there with dreams beyond their work. We're more than our job titles, more than the roles we play. We're novels yet unwritten. We're songs for another day. When Eleanor finished, the studio was completely silent. Billy looked around at his crew, hardened professionals who had recorded with some of the biggest names in music, and saw tears in every eye. "Eleanor," Billy said finally, his voice thick with emotion, "that's not just a song, that's an anthem." Eleanor looked up from the piano, her own eyes wet. "You really think so?" "I know so. That song is going to change lives." Over the next 2 weeks, they recorded 12 songs, each one revealing another facet of Eleanor's extraordinary talent. She wrote about the elderly farmer who came to the diner every day because it was the only place he felt less alone. She wrote about the young mother struggling to raise her children while her husband worked double shifts. She wrote about the town itself, its faded glory, its persistent hope, its quiet determination to survive in a world that had largely forgotten it existed. But perhaps most powerfully, she wrote about transformation, about the possibility of becoming more than the world expects you to be. The album, which they decided to call Songs from the Diner, captured something that Billie realized had been missing from popular music for a long time: authentic stories about real people living real lives. Eleanor's classical training gave the songs sophisticated harmonies and arrangements, but her years of life experience gave them emotional depth that no amount of technical skill could manufacture. When they finished recording, Billie knew they had created something special, but he also knew that Eleanor's story was far from over. "What happens now?" Eleanor asked on the last day of recording as they packed up the equipment. "Now we see if the world is ready for Eleanor Murphy," Billie said. Eleanor had decided to use her married name professionally as a tribute to her late husband, who had always believed in her music. Billie had arranged for the album to be released through his own label, with full creative control remaining with Eleanor. The first single, The Waitress's Song, was released 3 months later. Billie wasn't sure what to expect. The music industry had changed dramatically since his heyday, and there was no guarantee that radio stations would play a song by an unknown 50-year-old woman from small-town Ohio. But he underestimated the power of authentic storytelling. The song began getting airplay on adult contemporary stations, and something remarkable happened. People didn't just listen to it, they responded to it. Radio stations started getting calls from listeners who wanted to hear it again. Coffee shops and restaurants began playing it, with servers and customers alike connecting with its message. But it was social media that truly amplified Eleanor's voice. Videos of service workers singing along to The Waitress's Song began appearing on various platforms, each one tagged with messages of pride and dignity. The hashtag #MoreThanMyJob began trending, with people sharing their own stories of dreams deferred but not forgotten. Eleanor watched all of this from her small apartment above the diner in Millfield, overwhelmed by the response to her music. She'd agreed to a few phone interviews, but mostly she continued her life as before, serving coffee, taking orders, humming to herself as she worked. But everything had changed. The second single, Tuesday Regular, became an even bigger hit, resonating with anyone who had ever felt invisible or forgotten. Eleanor found herself invited to perform on national television, an experience that terrified and thrilled her in equal measure. Billie accompanied her to New York for her first television appearance on a late-night talk show that specialized in more intimate, acoustic performances. Eleanor wore the same simple blue dress she had worn to their first recording session, and when she sat down at the piano in the studio, Billie could see her hands trembling, just as they had that first night at the diner. But when she began to play, all the nervousness disappeared. Eleanor became the musician she had always been meant to be, her voice carrying across the studio and into millions of homes across the country. The audience, typically jaded New Yorkers who had seen everything, gave her a standing ovation that lasted nearly 5 minutes. Afterward, in the green room, Eleanor sat quietly, still processing what had just happened. "How do you feel?" Billie asked. Eleanor considered the question carefully. "Like I'm finally myself again," she said. "For 15 years, I felt like I was pretending to be someone else, playing a role that didn't fit. For the first time in so long, I felt like Eleanor Murphy, musician." The album was released 6 months after that first night at the diner, and it debuted at number 3 on the Billboard 200. Music critics praised Eleanor's authentic voice and sophisticated songwriting, with many comparing her to classic singer-songwriters like Carole King and Joni Mitchell. But for Billy, the greatest validation came from an unexpected source. He was in a small diner in Pennsylvania, traveling incognito as he often did, when he heard the familiar opening chords of the waitress's song playing over the restaurant's sound system. He looked up to see the waitress, a young woman probably in her 20s, singing along under her breath as she cleared tables. When she approached his booth to take his order, Billy couldn't resist asking about the song. "Oh, that's Eleanor Murphy," the waitress said, her face lighting up. "Have you heard of her? She used to be a waitress just like me, and now she's famous for singing about people like us. That song makes me feel like what I do matters, you know?" Billy nodded, feeling a warmth spread through his chest that had nothing to do with the coffee. "Yeah, I know exactly what you mean." A year after their first meeting, Billy returned to Millfield for Eleanor's homecoming concert, a free performance in the town's small park, organized as a benefit for the local food bank. The entire town turned out, along with music fans from across the Midwest who had driven hours to hear Eleanor perform. Billy watched from the side of the makeshift stage as Eleanor, now comfortable in her role as a performer, shared her songs with the people who had known her long before she was famous. She dedicated Tuesday Regular to Mrs. Henderson, who was sitting in the front row with tears streaming down her face. She sang Murphy's Garage, while Danny Murphy, who had started painting again after hearing Eleanor's story, grinned from ear to ear. But it was when Eleanor performed a new song, written specifically for this concert, that Billy felt the full impact of what had happened in this small Ohio town. The song was called "The Stranger at Table 6, and it told the story of their first meeting, how a chance encounter between two people from different worlds had changed both their lives forever. He could have passed right by me, could have looked the other way, but he saw something worth defending on an ordinary day. Now I know that angels come in the strangest disguise. Sometimes they're famous musicians, sometimes they're just kind eyes, and sometimes salvation wears a leather jacket. Sometimes it orders apple pie. Sometimes it speaks up for the voiceless. Sometimes it asks you why you cry. The stranger at table 6 changed everything I knew, but mostly he reminded me of what I could still do. As Eleanor sang, Billy found himself thinking about the chain of events that had brought them to this moment. His bus breaking down in exactly the right place at exactly the right time. His decision to walk into Murphy's diner instead of waiting with his crew. Eleanor's courage in sharing her music with a stranger, and her even greater courage in trusting him with her dreams. But mostly, he thought about the power of seeing people, really seeing them, beyond their circumstances, beyond their job titles, beyond the assumptions we make about who they are and what they're capable of. After the concert, as the crowd dispersed and the stage was being dismantled, Billy found Eleanor sitting on a bench, still holding her guitar, looking out over the town that had shaped her life. "Any regrets?" he asked, sitting down beside her. Eleanor considered the question, just as she considered everything, carefully, thoughtfully. "About the music, none at all. It's been the adventure of a lifetime." "But," Eleanor smiled, "but this is still home. These people are still my people. Success doesn't change where you come from or who you really are." Billy nodded, understanding. Eleanor had achieved something that many musicians never do. She had found a way to honor both her art and her roots, to embrace her dreams without abandoning her values. "What's next?" Billy asked. Eleanor gestured toward the diner, where the lights were still on, and a few late-night customers were probably nursing cups of coffee and pieces of pie. "I'm thinking about buying Murphy's Diner. The owner wants to retire, and I'd like to keep it going. Maybe turn it into a place where people can come not just for food, but for music too. Open mic nights, maybe some workshops for local musicians." Billy smiled, recognizing the perfect symmetry of the idea. Eleanor had found her voice in that diner. Now she wanted to help others find theirs. And the touring, the recording? Oh, I'll keep doing that too. But this is my base, my foundation. This is where the songs come from. As they sat in comfortable silence, Billy reflected on how much had changed since that afternoon when he'd first walked into the diner. Eleanor had recorded 2 more albums, both critically acclaimed and commercially successful. She had performed at the Grammy Awards, been featured on magazine covers, and had her songs covered by artists across multiple genres. But perhaps more importantly, her story had inspired countless others to pursue their own deferred dreams. Billy regularly received letters from people who had been moved by Eleanor's example to dust off their own creative ambitions, to believe that it was never too late to become who they were meant to be. There was the 45-year-old accountant who had started a blues band, the 60-year-old teacher who had published her first novel, the 50-something mechanic who had returned to art school. Eleanor's courage had given them permission to take their own leaps of faith. As Billy prepared to leave Millfield the next morning, he stopped by the diner one last time. Eleanor was there, of course, wearing her familiar uniform and serving coffee with the same gentle efficiency he remembered from their first meeting. But everything about her was different now, the way she carried herself, the light in her eyes, the confidence in her movements. "The usual?" she asked with a grin as he slid into what had become his regular booth. "Just coffee," Billy said. "And maybe a song." Eleanor laughed and began humming the melody that had started it all, the tune that had stopped him in his tracks and changed both their lives forever. Other customers in the diner looked up and smiled, recognizing the voice that had put their small town on the map. As Billy listened to Eleanor's humming, he thought about all the Eleanors still out there, talented, creative people whose circumstances had forced them into roles that didn't reflect their true potential. He thought about the servers and clerks and drivers and cleaners who carried symphonies in their hearts and novels in their minds, waiting for someone to see them, really see them, as more than their job titles. And he made a quiet promise to himself to keep looking, to keep listening, to keep being open to the possibility that the next person who served him coffee or helped him with his luggage or cleaned his hotel room might be harboring dreams that could change the world. Because that's what Eleanor had taught him, that extraordinary talent doesn't always come in expected packages, that sometimes the most beautiful music comes from the most ordinary places, and that everyone deserves to be seen for who they truly are, not just what they do for a living. 6 months later, Billy received a package in the mail from Millfield, Ohio. Inside was a CD, the first recording to come out of Eleanor's renovated diner, now called Murphy's Place, a diner and music venue. The CD featured Eleanor performing alongside several local musicians who had been inspired by her story to share their own talents. But it was the note accompanying the CD that brought tears to Billy's eyes. "Dear Billy, thank you for seeing me when I couldn't see myself. Thank you for reminding me that dreams don't have expiration dates and that it's never too late to become who you're meant to be. The diner is thriving, and we've had musicians from all over the country stop by to play. There's something magical about this place now. Maybe there always was, and I just needed to believe in it. But mostly, thank you for showing me that kindness isn't just about being nice. It's about seeing the potential in people and giving them the courage to pursue it. I've enclosed a recording of our latest open mic night. Listen to track 7. It's a 16-year-old girl named Sarah who reminds me a lot of myself at that age, full of dreams and raw talent. She's been coming to the diner every week after school, and I've been teaching her some basic music theory. Her parents think it's just a hobby, but I hear something special in her voice. Maybe you'll hear it too. With gratitude and friendship, Eleanor P.S. Mrs. Henderson finally heard from her son. He called after seeing me on television and realizing that the Tuesday regular song was about his mother. They had a long overdue conversation, and he's planning to visit next month. Music has a way of healing old wounds, doesn't it? Billy set the letter down and reached for the CD player, his heart already swelling with anticipation. As he listened to the recording, he could hear the warm acoustics of the renovated diner, the gentle clatter of dishes in the background, and the supportive murmur of an audience that understood what it meant to chase a dream. When track 7 began, Billy immediately understood why Eleanor had wanted him to hear it. The girl's voice was young and untrained, but it carried something indefinable, that same authentic quality that had stopped him in his tracks when he first heard Eleanor sing. The song was simple, just the girl and an acoustic guitar, but it told a story that was both personal and universal. She sang about being 17 in a small town, about feeling different and misunderstood, about dreams that seemed too big for the life she'd been born into. Billy found himself reaching for his phone before the song had even finished. "Eleanor," he said when she answered, "I just listened to the CD. And I think you're going to need a bigger diner." Eleanor's laugh carried across the miles, warm and knowing. "You heard something in Sarah too?" "I heard something extraordinary. Has anyone talked to her parents about music school?" "I've been thinking about it, but I wasn't sure if I was being realistic or just projecting my own dreams onto her." "Eleanor, trust me on this. You're not projecting. That girl has a gift, and she's going to need people who understand what that means." "People like you understood what mine meant?" Billy smiled, feeling the familiar warmth that came from being part of something larger than himself. Exactly like that. Over the following months, Billy found himself making regular trips to Millfield, ostensibly to visit Eleanor, but increasingly drawn by the unique atmosphere she had created at Murphy's Place. The diner had become something unprecedented, a gathering spot where blue-collar workers shared tables with traveling musicians, where local teenagers learned guitar chords from touring professionals, where dreams were nurtured alongside comfort food. Sarah, the 16-year-old Eleanor had wanted him to hear, became a regular fixture at the open mic nights. With Eleanor's encouragement and Billy's occasional mentorship during his visits, she developed not just as a performer, but as a songwriter, crafting lyrics that captured the complexity of growing up in a place where everyone knew everyone else's business. Billy watched with pride as Sarah's confidence grew, as she began to believe in her own talent the way Eleanor had learned to believe in hers. When Sarah's parents finally heard their daughter perform at one of the open mic nights, Billy saw the exact moment when they realized that this wasn't just a teenage phase. Their daughter had inherited something rare and precious, and it deserved to be taken seriously. The conversation that followed reminded Billy of his own youth, of trying to convince his family that music could be more than just a hobby. But unlike his own experience, Sarah had advocates. Eleanor, who understood the journey from dream to reality, and increasingly her own parents, who were beginning to see their daughter through new eyes. "She needs proper training," Billy told Sarah's parents after one particularly impressive performance. "There are scholarship programs, summer intensives, places where she can develop her skills without abandoning her roots." Sarah's mother, a practical woman who worked as a nurse in the county hospital, looked skeptical. "These music schools cost a fortune, and there's no guarantee she'll make a living at it." "There's no guarantee she'll make a living at anything," Eleanor interjected gently. "But there is a guarantee that she'll regret it forever if she doesn't try." Billy watched the family navigate this crossroads, remembering his own parents' concerns, their desire to see him choose a safe career path. But he also remembered the moment when they finally understood that music wasn't something he did, it was something he was. That moment came for Sarah's family 3 months later, when a video of her performing at Murphy's Place went viral on social media. The song she performed was one she had written about her grandmother, a woman who had raised 7 children during the Depression, while somehow maintaining enough optimism to sing lullabies every night. The video captured not just Sarah's performance, but the entire atmosphere of the diner, the mix of locals and visitors, the supportive audience, the sense of community that Eleanor had fostered. Within a week, It had been viewed millions of times, with comments pouring in from around the world. "This is what music should be," wrote one commenter. "Real people, real stories, real emotion." "I've been to a lot of concerts," wrote another, "but I've never seen anything as authentic as this." The attention brought opportunities. Recording studios interested in working with Sarah, music schools offering scholarships, managers wanting to represent her. But it also brought something more valuable, validation that what was happening at Murphy's Place mattered, that Eleanor's vision of a space where music and community intersected was resonating with people far beyond Millfield, Ohio. Billy helped Sarah and her family navigate the sudden attention, drawing on his decades of experience in the music industry to ensure that the 16-year-old didn't get overwhelmed or exploited. Most importantly, he made sure that Sarah understood that talent was just the beginning. Success would require dedication, resilience, and the ability to stay true to herself even when the world tried to change her. "The music industry will try to put you in a box," he told Sarah during one of their conversations. "They'll want to make you more pop, more country, more something other than what you are. Your job is to remember what Eleanor taught you, that authenticity is your greatest strength." Sarah nodded, her young face serious with the weight of the advice. "Eleanor says that songs should tell the truth about people's lives, not just what sounds pretty." Eleanor's right, and she should know. Her songs change the way people think about service workers, about small towns, about dreams deferred but not destroyed. Your songs could do the same thing for your generation. As Billy watched Sarah's career begin to take shape, carefully, thoughtfully, with Eleanor serving as both mentor and guardian of her artistic integrity, he reflected on the ripple effects of that first encounter at Murphy's Diner. Eleanor's success had inspired other dreamers to pursue their passions, but it had also created a space where the next generation could learn that music was about more than fame or fortune. It was about connection, authenticity, and the courage to tell your truth. 2 years after Sarah's video went viral, Billy found himself back in Millfield for a special occasion. The grand opening of the Eleanor Murphy Scholarship Fund, established to help young musicians from small towns pursue their musical education. The fund had been Sarah's idea, a way to ensure that financial circumstances wouldn't prevent talented young people from developing their gifts. The benefit concert featured Eleanor, Sarah, and a dozen other artists whose careers had been touched by the magic of Murphy's Place. But the most moving moment came when Mrs. Henderson, now in her 80s but still a regular at the diner, took the microphone to speak about what Eleanor's music had meant to her. "For years, I felt invisible," she said, her voice shaky but strong. "I was just another old lady eating alone, and I thought nobody saw me, nobody cared. Then Eleanor wrote that song about me, and suddenly I mattered. Suddenly my story was worth telling." Mrs. Henderson paused, wiping away tears. "That's what music does. It makes us visible to each other. It reminds us that everyone has a story worth hearing." The audience, a mix of locals and music industry professionals who had traveled to Ohio for the event, gave Mrs. Henderson a standing ovation that lasted several minutes. Billy found himself wiping away his own tears, struck by the simple power of her words. After the concert, as Billy prepared to leave Millfield once again, Eleanor walked him to his car. The streets were quiet now, the excitement of the evening giving way to the peaceful rhythm of small-town life. "Do you ever think about what would have happened if your bus hadn't broken down that day?" Eleanor asked. Billy considered the question, as he had many times over the past few years. "Sometimes. But I've learned that the best things in life happen when we're open to the unexpected." Eleanor nodded. "I used to think my life had been a series of disappointments. Losing my husband, giving up my music career, ending up in a job I never planned for. Now I realize that everything I went through prepared me for this moment, for this opportunity to help other people find their voices." Billy smiled, recognizing the wisdom that came from living fully, from embracing both triumph and tragedy as part of the human experience. You know what I think? What? I think your husband would be proud of you, not just for the success, but for the way you've used it to lift up other people. Eleanor's eyes filled with tears. I hope so. I really hope so. As Billy drove away from Millfield, he thought about the various ways people define success. In the music industry, success was often measured in album sales, chart positions, and award shows. But watching Eleanor over the past few years, he had come to understand a different kind of success. The satisfaction that came from using your gifts, not just for personal gain, but to create opportunities for others. 6 months later, Billy received another package from Eleanor. This time, it contained a book, a compilation of songs written by young musicians who had participated in Murphy's Place open mic nights over the past 3 years. The book was being sold to raise money for the scholarship fund, with all proceeds going directly to help young artists pursue their education. But it was the dedication that touched Billy most deeply. To Billy Joel, who taught us that the greatest gift you can give an artist is to believe in them before they believe in themselves. And to every dreamer who has ever served coffee, cleaned floors, or worked jobs that didn't match their calling, your time will come. Billy set the book down and picked up his phone, dialing a number he now knew by heart. Eleanor, it's Billy. I just got your book. What do you think? I think you've created something that's going to outlast all of us. These songs, this community you've built, it's bigger than music now. It's about hope. Eleanor was quiet for a moment. You know what the best part is? Tell me. Yesterday, a woman came into the diner. She was probably about my age, traveling through town. She heard one of the kids practicing and asked about our open mic nights. Turns out she used to write songs when she was younger, before life got in the way. She's thinking about coming back next week to perform. Billy smiled, understanding immediately. Another Eleanor, another dreamer who just needs someone to remind her that it's not too late. And you'll do that for her? Just like you did for me. As Billy hung up the phone, he thought about the beautiful cycle that Eleanor had created. Dreamers helping other dreamers, each generation of artists reaching back to pull the next one forward. It was a legacy that went far beyond any individual song or album. It was about the fundamental human need to create, to express, to be seen and heard and valued for who we truly are. Years later, when music historians would write about the Murphy's Place movement, the grassroots renaissance of authentic, community-based music that had spread to small towns across America, they would trace its origins back to a broken-down tour bus and a chance encounter in an Ohio diner. But Billy knew that the real story was simpler and more profound than any historical analysis could capture. It was about the moment when one person chose to see another person's potential, and the courage it took for both of them to believe that dreams could still come true, even when they arrived disguised as strangers in small-town diners. The movement that started with Eleanor continued to grow, inspiring similar venues in communities across the country. Billy often received invitations to visit these places, and he made it a point to accept as many as possible, always curious to see how the spirit of Murphy's Place had adapted to different locations and communities. Each venue had its own character, a converted bookstore in Vermont where poets and singer-songwriters shared the stage, a community center in Louisiana where jazz traditions mixed with contemporary folk music, a coffee shop in Montana where ranch hands revealed hidden talents for bluegrass and country music. But they all shared the same essential quality that Eleanor had created, a space where authentic expression was valued above polish, where community mattered more than commercial success. Billy's role in all of this had evolved from discoverer to advocate. He used his platform and connections to help promote these venues, to connect talented artists with educational opportunities, and to ensure that the movement maintained its grassroots authenticity even as it gained national attention. But perhaps his most important contribution was his continued presence, his willingness to show up and listen, to treat each new artist he encountered with the same respect and attention he had given Eleanor that first night. Young musicians learned that success in the music industry didn't have to mean losing touch with your roots or your values, and established artists were reminded of why they had fallen in love with music in the first place. On the 5th anniversary of their first meeting, Billy returned to Millfield for a celebration that had become an annual tradition. Murphy's Place now hosted a week-long festival featuring artists who had been discovered through the open mic circuit, along with workshops and masterclasses for aspiring musicians. Eleanor, now in her mid-50s and recognized as one of the most influential voices in American folk music, had never lost the grace and humility that had first impressed Billy. She still worked at the diner several days a week, still lived in her small apartment above the restaurant, still treated every customer with the same dignity and respect. But she had also become something more, a symbol of possibility, proof that it was never too late to pursue your dreams, and a beacon of hope for anyone who had ever felt overlooked or undervalued. During the festival's closing ceremony, Eleanor performed a new song she had written specifically for the occasion, called The Ripple Effect. It told the story of how one act of kindness could spread outward in ways that the original actors could never imagine. A stranger walked into my life one ordinary day, saw something worth believing in when I had lost my way. Now look around this little town, see what we've become, a symphony of dreamers beating like a drum. This is the ripple effect, when kindness meets with art, when someone takes the time to look inside another's heart. One voice can start a chorus, one dream can light a flame, and ordinary people can do extraordinary things. So next time you meet someone who's forgotten how to dream, remember you might be the one to show them what it means, to believe in possibilities, to trust in what could be, because we're all just strangers waiting for our chance to be free. As Eleanor sang, Billy looked out over the audience, hundreds of people from all walks of life, united by their love of authentic music and their belief in the power of community. He saw Sarah, now 21, and attending Berklee College of Music on a full scholarship, but still returning to Millfield every summer to mentor the next generation of young artists. He saw Mrs. Henderson, now 85 and still a regular at the diner, surrounded by a group of younger women who had made her their unofficial grandmother. He saw dozens of other faces, musicians who had found their voices at Murphy's Place, audience members who had discovered new artists, young people who had learned that their dreams were valid and worthy of pursuit. Each one represented a ripple from that original moment, when he had walked into a small-town diner and heard a woman humming a beautiful melody. But perhaps most importantly, he saw something that had become increasingly rare in the modern world, a genuine community built around shared values and mutual support, where success was measured not just in individual achievement, but in collective uplift. As the festival wound down and visitors began their journeys home, Billy found himself reluctant to leave. There was something about Millfield, about Murphy's Place, that felt like a sanctuary from the often harsh realities of the music industry and the world beyond. "Staying another day?" Eleanor asked as she found him sitting in his old booth, nursing a cup of coffee and watching the last of the festival crowd disperse. "Maybe," Billy admitted. "This place has become something special, Eleanor. You've created something that the world needs more of." Eleanor slid into the booth across from him, just as she had that first night 5 years ago. But everything was different now. Her confidence, her sense of purpose, her understanding of her own worth and potential. "Do you know what I've learned?" she said. "Success isn't about becoming someone else. It's about becoming more fully yourself." Billy nodded, understanding exactly what she meant. Eleanor hadn't changed who she was when she became successful. She had simply been given the opportunity to express who she had always been. "And what about you?" Eleanor asked. "What has all this meant to you?" Billy considered the question carefully. Over the past 5 years, his involvement with Eleanor and the Murphy's Place movement had reinvigorated his own career in unexpected ways. He had recorded an album of duets with artists he had discovered through the open mic circuit, including Eleanor and Sarah. He had written songs inspired by the stories he had heard in small-town diners and community centers across America. Most importantly, he had reconnected with the passion for music that had driven him in the first place. "You reminded me why I fell in love with music," he said finally. "It's not about the fame or the money or the awards. It's about connection between the artist and the audience, between people who might otherwise never meet, between the person you are and the person you're capable of becoming." Eleanor smiled. "So we helped each other." "We did, but you helped a lot more people than just me." Eleanor looked around the diner, where a few regular customers were finishing their evening meals, and a young musician was quietly tuning his guitar in preparation for an impromptu performance. "You know what I hope?" "What?" "I hope that somewhere out there, there's another person like I used to be, someone talented and forgotten, someone who's given up on their dreams. And I hope that someone like you walks into their life and reminds them that it's not too late." Billy raised his coffee cup in a toast. "To all the dreamers we haven't met yet." Eleanor raised her own cup. "And to the strangers who might change their lives." As they sat in comfortable silence, watching the small drama of the diner unfold around them, Billy reflected on the profound truth of what Eleanor had said. The world was full of hidden talent, deferred dreams, and untold stories. Most of them would remain hidden, their potential unrealized and their voices unheard. But sometimes, just sometimes, the right person walked into the right place at exactly the right moment, and everything changed. Sometimes a tour bus broke down in a small Ohio town. Sometimes a famous musician chose to eat at a local diner instead of staying with his crew. Sometimes a waitress found the courage to share her music with a stranger. Sometimes kindness and talent met in exactly the right way to create something beautiful and lasting. And sometimes ordinary people discovered that they were capable of extraordinary things. Never underestimate a kind heart. The person you help today may be the one who changes the world tomorrow. Sometimes the most beautiful music comes from the most unexpected places, and the most powerful stories are written by people whose names you'll never know. In a world that often feels divided and harsh, remember that there are still places like Murphy's Diner, still people like Eleanor Murphy, still moments when strangers become friends and dreams become reality. All it takes is someone willing to listen, someone brave enough to share, and the belief that everyone, absolutely everyone, has something beautiful to offer the world. The next time you're served by a waitress, or helped by a clerk, or encounter someone whose job seems ordinary and unremarkable, remember Eleanor's story. Remember that behind every uniform, every name tag, every tired smile, there might be a symphony waiting to be heard. Take a moment to really see the people around you. Ask them about their dreams. Listen to their stories. You never know, you might just discover the next voice that changes the world. And if you're someone whose dreams have been deferred, whose talents have been hidden, whose stories have gone untold, remember that it's never too late. Remember Eleanor Murphy, who went from serving coffee in small-town Ohio to inspiring millions of people around the world. Your time will come. Your voice matters. Your dreams are valid. All you need is the courage to believe in yourself, and maybe, just maybe, a stranger who's willing to believe in you too. So the next time you find yourself in a small-town diner, take a moment to listen. You might hear something that changes your life forever. And if you enjoyed this story, please take a moment to like this video, subscribe to our channel, and share your own stories of unexpected encounters and deferred dreams in the comments below. Because everyone has a story worth telling, and everyone deserves to be heard. Thank you for listening, and remember, the most beautiful music often comes from the most ordinary places.